We're going to talk about love today, as in workplace romances. Accept that it's bound to happen. So how do you navigate workplace romances as a leader? How do you handle breakups? All that and more. This is RT Sidebar. Stay tuned.
All right, RT Sidebar and our bar flies across the country. I'm Matt Pavlichko. I'm one of your wonderful hosts of RT Sidebar. We get to have our special guest today, Mr. Ed Garcia. We love him. He is our guest host. He loves to talk about love. We're all in love. I brought love with me to the RT Sidebar. As always, we have our boy, Jonathan Butler, JB. He is only drinking water today. We're very disappointed. And as always, our herder of cats, producer extraordinaire, Anna Hayes. As always, it's lovely to see you all. I want to start this out today talking about love. And my wife's going to kill me, but I'm going to say it anyway. I met her at work. We work together. I've been in codes with my wife. We fell in love because we're respiratory therapists. We have something in common. That happens. At that time, I married my wife. There were 3 married couples at my hospital in South Central Pennsylvania. It was crazy. And Ed just shared a statistic with us recently, and it says 33% of romances start in the workplace. Like, holy cow. And that comes from the Society of Human Resource Management. I think I got that right. That's huge. And in healthcare, it happens. It happens. Lots of dating. So this is going to happen in your hospital. I know it's happened to Ed, JB. I know it's happened to you. A lot of people meet and date at work. What do you do as a leader? It's kind of a touchy subject. JB?
I mean, you know, the rules, there's just a couple rules. One, you can't have a direct reporting relationship. And 2, you can't sign off on their time card. Otherwise, it's a little bit flexible. I mean, you could do some things, but those are 2 definite no-nos that are, you know, they'll separate you somehow. But I do like this episode. I personally nicknamed this episode the Clean Utility Room episode because everyone knows what happens in those clean utility rooms at night. You know, it is tough. It's going to happen, especially if you have a big department. I don't think I've ever been in a department where there wasn't people dating. I met my ex-wife at work. I can't think of any friends that I have that I didn't meet at work. So the relationships happen. It's just you just spend so much time with people around you at work that I mean, you know, you're going to build these relationships and they're going to carry on. So I was understanding when I was in the director role. To a point. There was a couple times where I swear a couple in my department was trying to have conceive their first child at work. Like this was on their bucket list of things to do. So those are, you know, crucial conversations that you got to pull them in and have. But, you know, you have to have some kind of leeway as long as the department functions. I don't have a big deal with it. Ed, I mean, you've been in a couple departments and I'm sure this has been an issue for you. How do you handle this?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. I've been wonderfully exposed to a bunch of workplace romance. I don't know if it was in the water in the Northeast part of the United States or if it was the warmth of Southern California. I'm not sure yet, but somehow there was always some sort of a love trigger going on in the department. I need to figure that out. I think also the water in the Northeast actually produced a lot of babies as well. So I don't know. I'm just the jury's still out on that, right? But yeah, it actually is a really interesting conversation, dialogue regarding, you know, romance at work. I mean, right now we looked at statistics. Before the pandemic, it was at 27%. Now it's at 33%, and that's because people are probably coming out of their shell and kind of getting back into work and kind of figuring things out a little bit more, or just, you know, trying something new. But, you know, it's always going to be a challenge for leadership in any capacity whatsoever, right? Being able to manage it, being able to navigate through the inception of a romance, But let's not forget, and we can continue talking about this at the end, is what happens during the breakup. That's actually even sometimes worse than the just the love that's happening in the department, because I've seen both. And it's wonderful to see people come together. It is. It really is, to be able to have them have some sort of connection and see them be happy. But let me tell you what, I think the most scariest thing is what happens after that kind of sours and goes south. And so hopefully we'll have some time to talk about that later on during this podcast.
I definitely think we need to talk about that. Okay. So JB, you said, hey, I'm okay with it if it's not disruptive. Is it always going to be disruptive in a way? There's always talk.
It's not always disruptive. I have had a couple departments where I was over and there was functional relationships and they were married couples and it worked. But like Ed said, I've been there when they've broken up, and those are the ugly ones, because now it starts impacting the department. You're going to start getting sick calls. You're going to start getting arguments. The department's going to take sides. And, even during COVID, which was interesting, we found out that there was extramarital affairs happening because they caught COVID from their, side boyfriend or side girlfriend and throughout the hospital. So that's when it starts to be a big deal, because, if it's not impacting the department, it's not a big deal. But once it starts impacting it, you're getting sick calls, quality diminishes, interfinding in the department. Then you got to put a stop to it. Or if it's, just obscene, where they're just kissing.
At what point do you set expectations?
Yeah.
And start this conversation, and with who? I think about my time as a platoon leader. We had to have conversations often with my soldiers about professionalism and what that means. And I did it with the whole team. I didn't take people apart. And that was pretty much as soon as I assumed leadership. And I'm thinking about this. I'm like, if it was after I had assumed leadership, when would have been an appropriate time? And maybe Valentine's Day would be an appropriate time for you to take your RT department and say hey, why don't we talk about this and set some expectations and boundaries, and this is what a healthy relationship would look like in the workplace, which maybe non-existent, or this is the expectations I have, and hey, here's what the hospital's policy is. But at what point do you actually start this conversation?
Immediately. As soon as I get wind that there's a relationship in the department, I immediately will bring them both in and say, hey, like you said, professionalism at the end of the day needs to reign supreme. And as long as you remain professional, does not come into the department, does not impact the department.
But you don't address the department as a whole. You take them aside and you wait until something happens.
So I'm on the fence with directing it towards the whole department versus the individuals, because you get into this one case where, if I don't do anything and I'm not doing anything in that department, I don't shit where I eat kind of deal. I don't do this. If I feel like I'm getting talked to all the time about something that I don't do, I have a negative response, right? So I kind of like to target it to the people who are actually doing it first, right? Now, if you get a pattern where there's multiples throughout the department, then I'll address the department as a whole, right?
Or check the water.
Or check the water.
Or if it's the one, do a little water check. But if it's just a ones and twos, I like to address them individually instead of the whole. But that's with quality, that's with performance, that's with the attendance.
No,
because imagine. No, go ahead.
Here's the next question though. So most relationships start in that are they, aren't they phase, and that means there's gossip. So how do you even catch wind that they are dating? Did they come to you? And so there's actually a lot of questions to dive in here. And you as the leader, what do you do? Because then what if they deny? Oh no, we're not in a relationship. That's just rumors. Or what if they say, oh yeah, we are, but we'd like to keep this secret? Or what if they say, hey, actually I'm on the queer spectrum, and there's other things that I'd like to discuss here only between us. Relationships get really kind of messy, and I don't think there's actually a right answer here. I'm just really just posing the questions.
there isn't a right answer. It's going to be specific to the individual, and you should treat it specific to the individual. And if they say, hey, no, this is a rumor, it's not true, like, okay, no problem. Don't even worry about it. It's a non-issue. But if it does come up again, and I do find out that there is a relationship, then we have to have another conversation.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's not. I believe you have no reason to. I always side on the side of the staff and believe what they say until I have a reason not to. But this is actually and we didn't even talk about this, but think about what would have happened in Tennessee in that sheriff's department where that one female police officer was terminated because she was having an affair with 7 of her coworkers. And you can see what happens in these situations when they get out of hand. I'm sure that there was that could have been resolved if they had early conversations, but the impact if you do that in the hospital and all of a sudden now you have 7 of your staff out, that it's just, especially in this environment where it's very difficult to rehire anybody, it's really critical. So I say address it early and as often as you can and away from everyone else. I mean, because this is a very personal conversation. Matt, I'm sure you've had these.
I mean, I've been on both sides, to be honest. My wife and I had to have a conversation and we had to disclose it. So that was interesting what Joe just put on the chat. Like, you have to disclose this, okay? And that's an important piece because that also says that you understand what the expectation is. It's an interesting conversation. Like, I have my own perspective. Ed, have you had to have one of these crucial conversations? Jefferson talked about it's like a one-on-one. It's like when it comes up, you gotta manage it. But is that what you've been seeing or your experiences?
As a matter of fact, I've had several conversations like this in my tenure. But one thing that I wanted to ask Jonathan as he was speaking was like, well, what if there is no hospital policy on needing to evoke or needing to share the information? Because does the department or does the organization have the responsibility to police such behavior? And where does it start? Who's a gatekeeper, right? I believe that, first of all, I believe as leaders, we should have the responsibility, but then what are the safeguards that we have as support from human resources to be able to say, hey, the statement in this organization, this department is that if there is a relationship, it's okay, we're good, but you need to let us know about it, right? So let's go can we go back a little bit, and where does our responsibility begin and where does HR's end, kind of thing? So what if the hospital doesn't have a disclosure clause in their onboarding? What would we do then?
That is a great question. Obviously, as a department, you wouldn't want to be the owner of this policy. You'd want it to be applied evenly throughout the hospital. So it should be an HR policy. If it's not, then you get on your HR director. But in the meantime, there's still going to be, hospital bylaws or hospital policies on conduct. And so even though it doesn't directly say that it's, relationship or regarding a relationship, there's still conduct policies and you would just have to kind of fall under there. But that's if it gets really bad. I mean, the first one should be an open, honest conversation where there's no harm, no foul, as long as you expressly say, this has to remain professional, it can't impact the department, can't impact the hospital, no public displays of affection, stuff like that. But there's always going to be the hospital policies on conduct, and I would kind of like funnel them under there. What do you think, Matt?
So I think so. I have a shout out later to somebody that just passed their HR examination, Rushan, and we were talking about it actually last night a little bit at dinner. Is that HR always appears to be, I'm going to create a policy and I'm going to be the police. Okay. We deal with humans. Okay. We take care of humans as leaders. We take care of humans as employees. Okay. And blanket statements to me doesn't work. What works for me the most is having that relationship with HR, sit down and have a conversation. Hey, I heard that there's some rumors about a couple that might be, and we're okay with that. I don't want to get in the way of love, like, but exactly. But I want to make sure that we're doing everything. I personally have never found the relationship disruptive. I find the talk about the relationship to be disruptive. And that's where I think it's probably the worst. It's like, like I feel bad kind of almost for the couple. It's not their fault they fell in love, and now they got to deal with, well, what are they doing? When it gets out of control real fast. So those crucial conversations are the worst ones I've ever had. They are cringe worthy, in my opinion.
You bring up a great point, Matt. I think that the awkwardness of the change in potentially the environment of a department is actually a lot more, something more that we should be concerned about than just the two people coming together, right? That's human behavior. But I think that being able to understand the impact of potentially unbalancing what you may have already built within your department, what perception does the rest of the team get from that? Or are they going to feel that they may be getting favoritism now that they're together? Their schedule is going to be assignment on the same night. Are they going to be working in the same ICU? Or does that make sense? So it's kind of like that awkwardness of how to deal with that within is also a key component into not only opening it up, but also understanding that these are the ground rules that we're going to be going forth, moving forth with. So that way everybody's aware that there is no favoritism. There's not like, hey, look, Sammy and Sam and Amanda, whatever, got together and, and then now they're going to have the same schedule. They're going to be working on the same weekend, the same holidays. It's just about then how do you navigate that awkwardness of then establishing or letting people know that there is something going on within the walls of your department.
And to me, that is what's always bailed me out. Okay. You can have a relationship, but everybody's going to follow these rules. This is how we govern our department. End of story. You may be married. It happens, but you're not going to be treated any different. I think that's probably the bigger one. I do want to talk about something that Jeff just brought up, and I could speak to this one a little bit as well, but I kind of wanted to get your thoughts until I give you my experience with this. Okay, the healthcare team has roles very similar to Anna and in her work in the military. You have leaders, you have subordinates, you have people that work together. And even though that people are not in the same department, a doctor is a leader. A nurse manager and an RT are not equal. Like there's a hierarchy to there. And you could potentially have a doctor date an RT. And yes, they're in completely different departments. They're all following the same policy, but that role is a little tricky. Have you had to deal with that?
I unfortunately have.
Okay.
We had a situation back on the East Coast in which that kind of relationship did occur, did it blossom. It was very interesting. It was a very crucial conversation that we actually had to get HR and the GME office involved in terms of being able to address it a little bit different. And so, yes, it was very unique, very awkward. Unfortunately, one of the two had to actually leave the organization for us to continue moving forward. And, and if you read a lot of the different articles that are coming out, especially after the post-pandemic and the romance at work, a lot of articles are coming out with research in terms of that. And actually, one of the ones that was from SHRM actually states that, having a succinct policy expectation is the best way to go, because then that covers you when things happen. You're like, okay, now that we're here, congratulations, we're happy for you. But now that we're here, now these are some of the options that we have on the table. You choose them, but these are the options that we have. Either one of you leaves one of you gets transferred to another department, or both of you leave, whatever it is that the organization decides, those options need to be there. So that way there's not that like, well, what should we do now? And you find that there's an awkward situation that could potentially even lead to litigation. So being able to have those kind of structured policies and procedures and guidelines by HR that can assist us as leaders to navigate through this even better.
JB, have you had to deal with that?
To an extent, but I have to agree with the route that Ed took on that, because anytime it leaves your department, if you're a new leader in the hospital and this is happening to you, you don't know how to resolve it, don't resolve it yourself. If it left your department, you immediately go to human resources, and then it's out of your hands. They're used to working in multi-departments with issues like this. And so I would hand it off immediately in those situations. I wouldn't try to go and talk to the staff in another department unless it's one of my other departments. But if it's not my department, I don't ever go talk to that individual. I might give their director manager a heads up, but I would always hand it off to human resources, because that is really what they're doing. That's what they're used for.
I think that's an important piece, that use your resources, establish expectations, have conversations about the expectations, not about the relationship, about the expectations goes a long way. So I'm going to give you a little story. Okay. There was a time, a long time ago, where my wife and I were together, and I taught at the college. And when you teach at the college, 20 years ago, you don't make a lot of money. So we were about ready to have our first child, Chase, our only child, Chase. And my wife goes, hey, you need to make more money. So I decided to go back to the see John is laughing. I had to go back to the hospital. So I was up for this job, but this job would make it where my wife, Heather, would report to me. And the dynamic, the perception is really interesting unless you're in that dynamic. Okay. My role, I approved her time card. I did the things that you're not supposed to do, but she was my direct report. And I will tell you, it was tougher on her than anybody else, because she had an expectation. Hey, I don't want to make my husband look bad as a leader. So she held herself up to this level, and maybe inadvertently I did. So that relationship kind of sucked for her. She did it because she loves respiratory therapy. I love respiratory therapy. We both worked in the NICU, but I think it was really tough on her. And everybody, relationships, even love, can hurt a little bit and can be challenging. So I think that is my story. The other question I have for both of you, which I have never dealt with, does the union get involved with stuff like this?
Actually, I want to throw it back on you as a question. Was it? You can't just have a good story like that and expect me not to ask questions.
This was drop a story, run away. That's exactly what I was going for right there, buddy. That's what I was doing.
So did the other people, like the staff in the department, know about the relationship?
Yes.
And then was there any complaints about favoritism?
100%. Yes, and 100%. So it was so. First off, they knew what they were getting into. Like, there was a conflict of interest. Like, we were already married. Everybody knew. It is what it was. I still am shocked that I even got that job, to be honest, when I think back on it. There was always this level of favoritism that, oh my God, Heather's going to get a better shift. It almost felt like natural to the other employees. The fact is Heather and I went out of our way to make our lives miserable to prove that there wasn't favoritism. Like, it was horrible. I was on call for 5 years straight because I didn't want anybody else to have to take call, including my wife, but I didn't want my wife to take call. So I couldn't let anybody take call. So I had to take call. So it was tough. Don't get me wrong. I'm blessed that I had a very professional respiratory therapist that I was married to that managed it very well, but it was tough. It was really tough. Thank you for making me come back to this question, JB. I really appreciate it. And it was tough. It was tough, but to be honest, it was tougher on her. It really was. It really was. Ed, what do you think?
And you know what? I was actually just looking over my notes, and according to a website here that uses SHRM, it says nearly half of those involved in a workplace romance are top level executives. It says almost 40% of those who had an affair at work were the company's owners or executives. What do we think about that?
Wow. JB?
You know, when you're in the C-suite, you do feel like you're a little bit above the rules and regulations of the hospital. You know, because when there's very few people that can discipline you, you feel like you can get away with quite a bit more. One of my last hospitals, our CEO was notorious for having his door closed for meetings that were not meetings. And you know, what are you going to do? Who's going to go discipline the CEO, right? Now, if you were like just some low level RT, you know, where you have supervisors, coordinators, managers, directors, everyone above you, you feel more eyes on you, but you feel a little bit above the law when you're in that position.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, CEO, I'm going to call my HR business partner. We're going to have a conversation. Like, I don't think that's happening.
It's not going to happen. And,
Yeah.
you know, they say, no, you can't have retaliation. But I guarantee you report the CEO, there's going to be a little bit of retaliation. You see these things in the news all the time. So, yeah, I mean, have any of you had any C-suite activity?
Say I've ever experienced what you've experienced, Jonathan, but wow, yeah, that's interesting. I have not heard that. It's been with a physician and you know, an RT, but no, never a C-suite. So that's that definitely is a very tough conversation to have or even approach without, you're right, feeling that you're probably going to be somewhere in the crossfires or something.
Anna, what do you got? What are your thoughts? I mean, you're the non-RT that hasn't had to deal with this, but you have in the military. You had that leadership piece. So Anna, what are your thoughts? What are your questions?
Well, I have a question. If, let's say, an RT is listening to this, what advice would you give them if they want to talk to either their manager or director, and how would you recommend that conversation should go? Is saying, hey, I have this relationship and I need to fill out this form, or I need to do XYZ, or I would really would prefer this shift, and I would also like to keep it a secret. Like what tips would you have to a new, like, recent grad who's listening to this?
JB?
I guess it's really going to depend on your leader. Not all leaders are great. Not all leaders are professional. They handle it differently, which is tough, especially if you're a new grad coming out where you're just terrified of your own shadow. But the best way to handle anything is just to be open and honest. You know, and if you don't feel like you can have that conversation with your director, and I'll give you a good example. Imagine the RT director that was staff, supervisor, manager, held every role in that hospital and is now the director. Most of the department's going to be their friends, right? And friends can't keep secrets. So if you feel like you're in that situation, then what you would want to do is go to human resources. And then you would want to tell human resources that way, because at some point it will get to human resources. It's best off if you told them as opposed to them finding out.
Agreed.
So I had a follow-up with this one too. In Ed Garcia's story, he said, I sat with that couple and I had human resources with me. What if you don't really trust your human resources, or I don't want to say like incompetent, but they don't seem as skilled? Who's like another person in the hospital that you could bring in to have in any crucial conversation? Like, who would be another resource that you could pull in?
The person that you report to. So if it's a VP, C-suite, any of them, you can have them sit in as well if you don't feel. And I have worked with incompetent human resources. So either you have them, your executives, sit in with you, or you just give them a heads up if they really don't have the time and the conversation needs to happen. You can just jot down notes and or minutes of the meeting and then hand it off to them as well. But that's kind of the next person I would tap.
Mm. I want to go back to being able to, I think for your first question, Anna, regarding about, do you feel comfortable reporting it to your director or manager? I mean, I have to echo what Jonathan says, right? It just depends on your leader, right? Depends on who it is that you report to, whether or not you feel comfortable, sharing that information. But there's another statistic I want to share with you guys. It says many have no idea about their company's take on workplace romance. It says companies should consider their own workplace romance policies. This is 41% of employees aren't even sure what their company's policy on work romance is, according to Vault. So again, it goes back to, well, what do I do? If we don't have a set criteria, then how do you know that the patient, oh my word, how do we know if the therapist is going to feel comfortable, or even, it doesn't even mean a therapist, it could be an employee, feel comfortable going to their boss if they don't even know what the structure is. So again, I think it's about, if we have set criteria within even our own departments or organization, is going to be make it easier for employees to feel comfortable in knowing what are the steps to take to be able to kind of reveal a love interest at work.
No, I'm laughing because and my partner here, he is in HR. And so when we started dating, he goes, oh, I filled out a form like on our first date, like I already reported. And I go, wait, what? And then that was very confident of you. And then like the next day I was like, oh, wait, I missed that training. Like, I don't think there's a form. What form? And he was like, oh yeah, I was lying. I was waiting to see like how long it would take you to realize that. But I have zero clue what the policy is. And then I did have that conversation with my manager. Like, I was like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, and we were so happy that it was just more like good news, because I think like we just have such an awesome team that everyone was very happy. So it wasn't even like a concern of professionalism or totally different situation. So it's just but I did feel comfortable enough to come like forward and say that. But yeah, I have no idea like oh gosh, I don't know if I should be saying this.
I think that you should be saying it. So, and I think that's what we're learning: open and honest. Have a real conversation. It's not a fun conversation for them either. Like, hey, I'm having this relationship. I don't want people to know, but I got to tell my boss. That's kind of creepy. I get it.
I have a question though. So Anna, this happened after your first date, but then how do you know it's gonna continue, right? So when is it that you share the information, right? Is it after the 5th date, after the 10th date? Is it after you move in, or after you get married? You see what I'm saying? It's kind of like,
that's that whole, like we were in that like phase that's like, are they, aren't they? Like when I said like everyone is like gossiping, like there was a phase and it was just like fun to enjoy that gossip, and we're on totally different teams, so it was fine. But yeah, like it was a slow natural progression, and then I would be like working late and a couple like more senior people would leave the office and be like, Anna, and they would like come to my desk and be like, give us the tea, like tell me all about it. And I would kind of plead the fifth. But I could tell like they loved talking about it, like it just made their day. But I was still trying to figure out how I felt in this whole situation. And so anyways, my scenario was just a very happy one, but that's what I mean by this is super complex. My actual advice of what I did in the military is totally different than the civilian world. Like shout out to Sergeant Grassmonk. We had situations where we were really mixing in the first enlisted females into combat arms, and instead of talking about dating, we just talked about professionalism and we linked it into ethics. And he took the soldier's creed and made every single sentence of the creed a question. So we would ask ourselves, like, am I American soldier? And I think that you could do the same thing in your department and be proactive instead of event driven by saying, hey, let's make this part of an overall ethics training and development. And maybe you could take a similar, whether it's your hospital values and standards or like the Hippocratic Oath, and then make it a question and ask yourself that. And it's always stood with me. Like I was a brand new lieutenant when he did that training development. yeah, what does it mean to be a professional? And what does it mean to be patient centric? And how are we united by patience? And then you just steer the conversation in that direction. I think that's what I would recommend, but this is really tough and there's no right way to do it. Thanks for asking though.
And Anna, you're bringing up great things. Like, you guys are part of different departments, and it's big. Is it the 5th day? Is the 4th day? What I want to talk about is it not even a date. So Joe Garcia always likes to be provocative. All right. I've been to plenty of after hours parties with the ED nurses or other people when I'm in my early 20s. We're at COVID. You don't see the outside world. We only see these people. Relationships flourished quickly and not formally. Let's say that. Lots of external off the clock. We're going to go bowling with the ICU team, those type of things, and things happen. Sometimes I mean,
those off the clock get-togethers though are kind of rough, because what a lot of people don't understand is that even if there's drinks involved, if you're not dating someone but you want to date someone and you really try to put the moves on them, you can get hit for sexual harassment outside your workplace.
Oh, yeah,
if it's a work event, you are still liable for sexual harassment. And then also too, I was just thinking about it, the gossip, depending on how bad that gossip gets, that can also be a form of sexual harassment. And those are also things that you can bring up with a gossiping department, that, to what the extent of what you were saying is part of sexual harassment, and you will be held accountable. So those are things that just popped up, especially with the out of work get-togethers, because when alcohol is involved.
And we all as humans love gossip in a way, right? We like it. It happens. You have a couple in a corner. Well, they're not even a couple. They're just like, hey, they would look good together, and they're talking. All of a sudden they are in closets. They're doing things they shouldn't be doing at work, and oh my God. And no, they might have just been flirting with one another, trying to test the waters. And we have them doing things that would get them in big trouble in HR. So that gossip piece, especially at a hospital, to me has always been the most disruptive, because 99% of the time it's not even true.
You changed my mind during the course of this podcast, because I didn't think of it that way, but I agree. The gossip is as big, if not bigger, of an issue.
So I want to go down the gossip tank a smidge. What happens if there's rumors of breakup?
Oof.
Ooh, they seem like they were arguing the other day. Their marriage might be falling apart. Their relationship might be falling apart. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it's not just rumors. And sometimes, and I know I've been a part of it, sometimes they're really ugly breakups. Ugly breakups. So Ed, you talked about it from the beginning. You were hoping you kind of went into this. I'd like to go into it right now. Gossip breeds badness. Breakups are rough. Gossip makes it worse. Tell us how to manage a breakup as a leader.
Many years ago, yes.
How to squash gossip, like what tips you would have to squash it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about squashing gossip, and let's talk about breakup as well. So
okay, there you go.
I think squashing gossip, the best way to do it is to make sure that again, I go back to the statement that Jonathan made earlier, depends on the leadership, right? And I believe that as a leader, if we are able to have open, vulnerable conversations as adult human beings are work in a professional world, then we should be able to squash all gossip very quickly by making sure we make clarifying statements. And so I think that by squashing gossip, it has to be, I know it may, and I know, I think it was Jonathan who actually said that not everybody needs to hear everything, right? But I think by setting and continually expressing expectations of conduct at work, off of work, who you represent, what your profession is, what organization you represent, even while you're not even in the walls of it. I think that by continuing that conversation, it continues to just fester the ability for individuals to take ownership and responsibility for themselves. And then at that moment is when, if there is gossip, you squash it very quickly and say, hey, listen, this is not what we do here. This is not how we act here. This is not what we're going to continue to condone or accept. So these conversations need to go away. And these are some of the facts of what we can share with you right now. Because there's some things that are going to be private that you cannot share, but you want to make sure you have some clarifying statements to be able to squash that gossip. And it actually occurred to me many, many years ago in which we had to go ahead and squash some gossip that was going around regarding some relationship that had gone awry. And there was absolutely no truth to it, but people were perceiving it. And until we said, hey, folks, listen, whatever it is that you're hearing out there, it is not true. Please respect people's privacy as they go through whatever it is they're going through. But that's not what we're here for. We're not here to go ahead and, we're not TMZ. We're not the, whatever. What was the other one? The other show used to be back in the 90s. I forget. Anyway, so we're not one of those gossip shows, right? This is real life, folks. And so if there's anything, these individuals will let us know. We have that kind of open environment in which we can share, hey, guys, listen, it's not going well. We're just going to take some time off, or, oh, no, it's going great. We're actually about to get engaged. We're planning our wedding. And it can be both, right? But I think that if you develop that family atmosphere and people feel comfortable just speaking out and being able to share, I think that it actually produces positive, outcomes. Now let's talk about the breakup, because I've been in one of those as well. And that one is horrible. That one is that one I don't ever want to go through ever again in my career. Because at one time everybody's happy-go-lucky. Next thing you know, they are like wanting to stab each other with blood gas syringes, kind of thing. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those terrible environments that you have to navigate through and be able to stand and get in front of it very quickly and say, I see that there's a problem in paradise. What is it that we're going to do to fix it? Are we going to go ahead and agree to disagree, agree to work together and not really share what has happened, or one of you has to leave and make a move somewhere else? And those are crucial conversations that unfortunately we had to remove an employee, and we had to navigate them to go ahead and find another job somewhere else, as they were becoming very disruptive towards the person that they had been in a relationship with. And it's never fun. It's never fun, but we want to make sure that we are always very clear and upfront with our expectations. And when we did it, we had some options. Okay, these are the options. Either we're going to be putting you both on separate shifts, one on nights, one on days, totally different opposite schedules, or one of you will have to move on to another organization. And unfortunately, we had to lose one of them to another organization, as they were still not able to manage or to be able to work things out in a positive manner.
Ed, I just had a question while you were going over your experience. Now, if you hear gossip, do you vet the gossip, or do you just squash everything?
I think that wherever there's smoke, there's fire, right? So there's going to be some partial truths to different things. And it's about making sure that you ask those questions very, very upfront. Hey, this is what I'm hearing. I need you to validate, or I need you to reject what it is that's being out there. Is it true? Is there any truth to that? If there's no truth to it, then I will go ahead and advocate before everybody and kind of squash that. However, there is some truth in there. You need to clarify what are some of those truths inside some of those gossip. Because believe me, where there's smoke, there's always going to be fire. And, it takes two to tango, right? So there's somewhere around there's going to be a partial truth and a whole lot of just perception and just people's own version of what may have happened.
I think that you said something that's important to me, and I know Anna's ready to talk. She loves it. She's in love. You said something about family and values, that your department, you establish an expectation. And just like what Joe Garcia said, managing energy, not just managing people, managing the values of that department. because that department, and I was told by an HR person, don't ever call them family. That's what they are. Many of our respiratory therapists, especially during COVID, spent more time with their colleagues than they did with their own family. And if you're young and you're 20 something, those are your peeps. Those are the people you're going to grow up with. And to establish a culture of shared values on how we're going to treat one another is also a great expectation to have. So when you do have something that is very challenging to manage, you have those to back up on. Anna?
I was thinking about, like, Ed, you give a great perspective as the leader who's managing the breakup, but then there's the person in the relationship who might be like listening to this. And so I did have a conversation with my partner where I was like, what is this going to look like if we were to break up? Like, let's just run through this like game theory of what does work look like if we are not together. And we ultimately decided like the risk was worth it and that we would be fine again because of that element of professionalism, that there was no concern. But we also had to make like different boundaries not to take work home. We had to like set expectations in our own relationship. So I think that's another interesting tidbit to consider. So like you as the leader, you set expectations for the team, and then you encourage your team to then set expectations within their own relationship just to be preventative of a possible breakup.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Joe
Yeah,
just said it, and I really want to. If we have positive values and behavior, this will equal a positive culture.
Yeah.
Anna, you and your partner said we want to make sure that this remains positive, and you had a shared value to be forward-thinking enough that, hey, this is not something you want to talk about, but it's something we need to talk about because you also value your workplace. I think that's a big deal. Ed?
Yeah, I agree. You know, and Anna, first of all, you are the outlier. You're not you're not the norm, right? I'm just letting you know that. So congratulations, because not everybody thinks that way. Everybody's just, you know, so lazy-eyed or whatever you want to call it. And they're like goo goo gaga over whatever is going on, and they have absolutely no clue about anything that may happen afterwards, right? It's that consumerism of love, right? I guess you can call it. It's just that there's so much into it that they just don't understand that what are some of the consequences of different choices in a relationship and how they end up. So you are the exception and not the rule. But the thing about it is that you know, it is very true. And I have to agree with Joe. If you set an expectation of a positive environment, of positive values of what they're expected, I believe that then those people that you lead and the people that you serve should be able to kind of understand what the values and what the expectations are. It starts with leadership. It really does. And I do say that very openly. However, I do have to put a little asterisk to that, right? Not everybody's willing to go ahead and learn. Not everybody's willing to go ahead and understand what are the values and positive attributes you want to bring to a team. Not everybody wants to accept that because everybody has their own values. However, I do believe that at the end of the day, we should exhibit the values that our team should have. And I just want to say congratulations for thinking way outside the box. But let me tell you what, you're probably like the 1%. So congratulations.
Well, I've always been told that I've been an outlier, but I'm lucky because I actually reached out to another couple in the company and said, hey, how did you do this? And so there's another tip, right? Somebody else trailblazed for me and they had a totally different experience. And they told me that there were jokes being made of the company is saying like, oh, if they break up, this person's more valuable than this person. So we're team this person because we'll keep them. But it was all humor. It was all funny. And then it wasn't. So the couple went to, you know, the head of this joke really, which happened to be a higher level, and said, hey, you know, that's not appropriate. And I don't appreciate you doing that. And we're both like valuable contributors to the team. And I know you're joking and I know you're so supportive of our relationship, but I'm like really lucky that they did that because they had to coach everybody else and how to manage like the office gossip.
I think I speak for both Matt and Jeff and everyone who's managed anyone. I wish I had more people like you on my team when I was in the hospitals, because professional, I mean, you're like top, like Ed said, top 5% of fifth percentile of professionalism, because to think that much forward and then to also think how you're going to react, and you know yourself and what are you going to do in that situation. And then imagine if you're a lifer and then the person you're dating is a lifer of the company, you do not want to go anywhere else. Then you would have to say, okay, so what if we break up? I don't want to leave and you don't want to leave. So how's that going to work out? To even have those conversations, God, I wish I had people like you in my departments when I was coming up in the hospital.
How about it, JB? And I think that, it's the value system, but it's also, hey, I value you as a person. I also value this company. And I want to make sure that I'm reducing risk as much as possible. I think that's what Anna did. She reduced risk, which to me, that goes a long way. I agree. We all agree that Anna is the greatest person ever. Jeff Maglin, just so you heard that for her about later.
Thank you all.
I got the thumbs up. That's all I was looking for.
I have learned a lot from all of you, and I've actually already been like, yeah, we gotta be proactive and train development on professionalism, and hey, how do we create an inclusive culture? Because I think that's what you were going at, as well as maintaining the level of standards. So I think that takes time and consideration and planning, because I'm not good enough to just jump into a crucial conversation after an event has occurred.
Agreed.
And then maintaining like authenticity as a leader in anything you do and in and out of your workplace. I think those are like the biggest takeaways that I have from this, and let's keep this sidebar going. So do you guys want to end it with some shout outs here?
100%. Always, Anna. Always, always, always.
So if you're new to RT Sidebar, we like to end the podcast with shout outs to all those in the profession to celebrate, whether it's a graduation, a birthday, an anniversary, a promotion, whatever it is. We love shout outs. You're welcome to give a shout out. There is a note in a link in the show notes to do so. So Matt, kick it off.
So we talked a little bit about HR today, and I met a really awesome person yesterday. Her name's Roshan. She passed her SHRM certification yesterday. A good friend of us here at Vapotherm from the University of Florida. Super excited. Congratulations, Roshan.
And happy birthday to Pars Patel and Tony T.
Big shout out to the AC Hotel in Gainesville. As I walked with my friend Balloon, they said, give us a shout out on RT Sidebar. And I said, I do that. But I also want to give another big shout out and the hospitality of the University of Florida's RT and ED departments. Thank you for inviting Lynch and I to spend some time with you today. It was great. I loved it. Ed.
Hey, I'd like to give a shout out to the respiratory care department at UCI Health in Irvine, California, or Orange, California, even though University of California, Irvine. But anyway, it doesn't matter. We're just great people there who work there, and not because I work here, but because they're just great people. We're doing some great things. We've been able to raise funds for families. We've been able to really kind of change the culture and change the trajectory. And so we're just so happy about where we're headed to. And so shout out to the great people of respiratory department at UCI.
And part of why I love, or we're sharing love. So I love working with Matt and Anna and Jeff, and I love RT Sidebar. It was really, yesterday was a good example. I was out in the field visiting, who I want to give a shout out to now is an RT director in Palm Springs, Amy, active listener of the RT Sidebar, but she told me that she's taking things away from the RT Sidebar and applying them at work and making her department better and making her hospital better. And that's what I love, is that we have an impact on our profession and we're growing together. I mean, that my heart is full with this. And so I love everything and I love everyone. So have a great Valentine's Day.
We just love everything.
And imagine, I only had water too, so.
I know. Imagine how much love you would have. So
exactly.
One of the biggest shout outs of everybody, and we don't mention Vapotherm all that much, but we have a shout out of a person we love at Vapotherm, Laura Segrin. You know what you did yesterday. Thank you for Matt and Lynch. We're so happy that you're part of us. You're the biggest part of our family. Happy belated birthday.
Hey, listen, I have to do one last shout out. It's Valentine's Day. You got to go ahead and show some love to your spouse, right? So shout out to my wife, who's actually going back to school, getting her master's. She's kicking butt and taking names along the way in her career. I'm so proud of her. So, hey, happy Valentine's Day, love.
Love you, Heather.
That's it for this week's RT Sidebar. If you liked what you heard today, register for the live recording with the link in the show notes. By registering, you'll also be subscribing to a bi-monthly newsletter from us to all the barflies. Barflies, as in those who frequent bars, like sidebars. Okay, you get it. Register. Especially since our next episode is with Kaylee Dayton on an awake and walking ICU. You don't want to miss it. Thank you, and see you all next time. Vapotherm does not practice medicine or provide medical services or advice. Any clinical recommendations provided herein are solely those of the speaker. Practitioners should refer to the full indications for use and operating instructions of any products referenced before use. The team behind the sidebar are employees of Vapotherm, and our guest is not compensated.